Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and thank you so much for joining us. You might be interested to know that you're trending on Twitter.
Right now?
So people are listening.
Yeah.
I thought the most chilling sentence that you've come out with so far this afternoon, and I wrote it down, anger and hate is the easiest way to grow on Facebook. I mean, that's shocking, isn't it? What a horrendous insight into contemporary society on social media that should be the case.
One report from Facebook demonstrates how there's different kinds of feedback cycles that are all playing in concert. So it said, when you look at the hostility of a comment thread, so let's look at a single publisher at a time and take all the content on Facebook and look at the average hostility of that comment thread. The more hostile the comment thread, the more likely a click will go out to that publisher, right? Anger incites traffic outwards, which means profit. We also see that people who want to grow really fast, they do that technique of harvesting viral content from other groups and spreading into their own pages, into their groups, and they bias towards stuff that gets an emotional reaction. And the easiest emotional reaction to get is anger, and psychology research has shown this for decades.
So those of us who are adults or aspiring adults, like members of the committee, will find that hard enough to deal with. But for children, this is particularly challenging, isn't it? And I'd like to follow up on some of Baroness Kidron's very good questions, specifically on harm to children. Perhaps you could tell us, for people who don't know, what percentage of British teenagers can trace, for those who feel like this, their desire to kill themselves back, I can't even believe I'm saying that sentence, but back to Instagram.
I don't remember the exact statistic. I think it was around 12%.
It's
13. Or?
It's exactly that.
Yeah.
And body image is also made much worse, isn't it?
Yes.
And why should that be for people who don't understand that? Why should it be that being on Instagram makes you feel bad about the way your body looks?
Facebook's own reports say it is not just that Instagram is dangerous for teenagers. It is actually more dangerous than other forms of social media, because
Why?
TikTok is about doing fun activities with your friends. It's about performance. Snapchat is about faces and like augmented reality. Reddit is at least vaguely about ideas, but Instagram is about social comparison and about bodies, right? It is about like people's lifestyles, and that's what ends up being worse for kids. There's also an effect, which is a number of things are different about a life mediated by Instagram than what high school used to be like. So when I was in high school, it didn't matter if your experience at high school was horrible. Most kids had good homes to go home to, and they could, at the end of the day, disconnect. They would get a break for 16 hours. Facebook's own research says now the bullying follows children home. It goes into their bedrooms. The last thing they see at night is someone being cruel to them. The first thing they see in the morning is a hateful statement. And that is just so much worse.
So they don't get a moment's peace.
They don't get a moment's peace.
If you're being bullied all the time.
Yeah.
Now, you've already told the Senate, and you've also told us what Facebook could do to address some of these issues, but some of your answers were quite complicated.
Oh no, sorry.
So perhaps you could tell us in a really simple way that anybody can get what Facebook could do to address those issues. Children who want to kill themselves, children who are being bullied, children who are obsessed with their body image in an unhealthy way, and all the other issues that you've addressed. But what is it that Facebook can do now, without difficulty, to solve those issues?
There are a number of factors that interplay that drive those issues. On a most basic level, children don't have as good self-regulation as adults do. That's why they're not allowed to buy cigarettes. When kids describe their usage of Instagram, Facebook's own research describes it as an addict's narrative. As an addict's narrative. The kids say, this makes me unhappy. I feel like I don't have the ability to control my usage of it. And I feel that if I left, I'd be ostracized. I am deeply worried that it may not be possible to make Instagram safe for a 14-year-old, and I sincerely doubt it's possible to make it safe for a 10-year-old.
So they shouldn't be on it?
I I would be surprised. I would love to see a proposal from an established independent agency that had a picture of what a safe version of Instagram for a 14-year-old looks
But
like.
you don't think such a thing exists?
I am not aware of something that
Does Facebook care whether or not Instagram is safe for a 10-year-old?
What I find very deeply misleading about Facebook's statements regarding children is they say things like, we need Instagram kids because kids are going to lie about their age, and so we might as well have a safe thing for them. Facebook should have to publish what they do to detect 13-year-olds on the platform, because I guarantee you what they're doing today is not enough. And Facebook's own research does something where Facebook can guess how old you are with a great deal of precision, because they can look at who your friends are, who you interact with.
Because you're at school.
Yeah, because
that's a bit of a giveaway.
Oh,
if you're
yeah.
wearing a school uniform,
Yes.
chances are you're on 20.
But I want to disclose a very specific thing. This is something actually the Senate found when we disclosed the documents to them. They found that Facebook had estimated the ages of teenagers and worked backwards to figure out how many kids lied about their ages and how many were on the platform. And they found for some cohorts, 10 to 15% of 10-year-olds were on the platform. Facebook should have to publish those stats every year so we can grade how good were they at keeping kids off the platform.
Right. So Facebook can solve this if it wants to do so.
Facebook can make a huge dent on this if they wanted to, and they don't, because they know that young users are the future of the platform, and the earlier they get them, the more likely they'll get them hooked.
Okay. And obviously young users are no different from the rest of us. They're also getting to see all the disinformation about COVID and everything else that the rest of us are getting to see. And just remind us what percentage of disinformation is being taken down by Facebook.
I actually don't know that stat off the top of my head.
Well, I believe it's, from what I understand, it's 3 to 5%.
Oh, that's for hate speech.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's approximately the same.
Well, I would guess so.
It's probably even less from the perspective of the only information that is false at Facebook is information that has been verified by a third-party fact-checking system. And that can only catch viral misinformation. So that's misinformation that goes to 500,000, 1 million people. And this is the most important thing for the UK. I don't believe there's anywhere near as much third-party fact-checking coverage for the UK compared to the United States.
Okay. And the wonders of texting tell me that actually the figure is 10 to 20% for disinformation. Yes, so I stand corrected, 10 to 20% for disinformation and 3 to 5% for hate speech. So a vast amount of disinformation and hate speech is getting through to children, which must present children with a very peculiar, jaundiced sense of the world. And we have absolutely no idea, do we, how those children are going to grow up and change and develop and mature, having lived in this very poisonous society at this very delicate stage in their development.
I'm extremely worried about the developmental impacts of Instagram on children. Beyond the fact that if you get an eating disorder when you're 16, you may have osteoporosis for the rest of your life, right? There are going to be women who are walking around this earth in 60 years with brittle bones because of choices Facebook made now. But I think the secondary thing that I'm super scared about is kids are learning that people they care about treat them cruelly. Because kids on Instagram, when they're removed with the feedback of watching someone cry or watching someone wince, they're much more hateful, they're much meaner to people, even who are their friends. Imagine what the domestic relationships will be like for those kids when they're 30 if they learn that people who care about them are mean to them.
It's a very disturbing thought. And the other very disturbing thing that you've told us about, which I think most people haven't focused on, is the idea that language matters. So we think Facebook is bad now, but what we don't tend to realise in our very Anglocentric culture is that all the other languages around the world are getting no moderation of any kind at all.
I think the thing that should scare you even more living in the UK is the UK is a diverse society. Those languages aren't happening abstractly in Africa and getting the raw, dangerous version of Facebook. A version of Facebook that Mark has said himself is dangerous. Engagement-based ranking is dangerous without AI. That's what Mark Zuckerberg said. Those people are also living in the UK and being fed misinformation that is dangerous, that radicalizes people. And so language-based coverage is not just a good for individuals thing, it is a national security issue.
That's interesting. You, on the social front, you pointed out that there might be differences between the United Kingdom and the United States. which it's not picking up, and I've said this to the committee before, but I've got personal experience of this in Twitter, where I'm a gay man, and I was called a greasy bender on Twitter, and I reported it to Twitter, and Twitter wrote back and told me that there was nothing wrong with being called a greasy bender. And then I wrote back giving the exact chapter and verse from their community standards, which showed it was unacceptable, and somebody wrote back to me, presumably from California, telling me that it was absolutely acceptable. Now, to be generous, it may just be that they didn't know what a bender was, because it's not in use in the United States. But honestly, I think I'd have Googled if I'd been them, just to find out why this MP was being so persistent about this particular word. In a nutshell, what do you want us to do in this case? What's the most useful thing in addressing the concerns that you've raised here?
I think forcing Facebook, so I want to be clear, bad actors have already tested Facebook. They've gone and tried to hit the rate limits. They've tried experiments with content. They know Facebook's limitations. The only one who doesn't know Facebook's limitation are good actors. Facebook needs to disclose what its integrity systems are and which languages they work in, and the performance per language or per dialect. Because I guarantee you the safety systems that are designed for English probably don't work as well on UK English versus American English.
All of this makes Facebook sound relatively benign, doesn't it? As if it's just not doing quite what it should be doing. But what your evidence has shown to us is that Facebook is failing to prevent harm to children. It's failing to prevent the spread of disinformation. It's failing to present hate speak. It does have the power to deal with these issues. It's just choosing not to, which makes me wonder whether Facebook is just fundamentally evil. Is Facebook evil?
I cannot see into the hearts of men. And I think there is a real thing of people, good people, and Facebook is overwhelmingly full of conscientious, kind, empathetic people.
You have to leave.
Good people who are embedded in systems with bad incentives are led to bad actions. And there is a real pattern of people who are willing to look the other way are promoted more than people who raise alarms.
We know where that leads in history, don't we? So could we compromise that it's not evil? Maybe that's an overly moralistic word. But the way that some of the outcomes of Facebook's behaviour is evil.
I think it's negligent.
Malevolent?
Malevolent implies intent, and I cannot see into the hearts of men. But I do believe there is a pattern of inadequacy, that Facebook is unwilling to acknowledge its own power. It believes in a world of flatness, which hides the difference. Like, children are not adults, right? They believe in flatness, and they won't accept the consequences of their actions. And so I think that is negligence, and it is ignorance. But I can't see into their hearts, and so I don't want to consider it malevolent.
Well, I respect your desire, obviously, to answer the question in your own way. But given the evidence that you've given us, I think a reasonable person running Facebook, seeing the consequences of the company's behaviour, would, I imagine, have to conclude that what they were doing, the way their company was performing, and the outcomes were malevolent, and would want to do something about it.
I would certainly hope so.